Sorry, I just had to clear my throat.
Oh, no, you're
I
good.
didn't want to do it while you were
Good.
talking.
I got you choked up.
Yeah.
It was like really emotional thinking about the dock side and things like that you didn't even use.
I don't even play red. Yeah.
You don't even play red.
No.
Well, I guess as far as things we're going to talk about now, it's going to be where do we want to start? Because I know we kind of said we're going to do like takes on 24, predictions, or not takes on 24. We're out of 24. We are in 25.
Yeah.
I feel like so much happened, but it's a blur, and I've forgotten everything that happened.
Yeah.
It's like we just sat down and did one of these. But we talked about doing takes on 24. Our predictions going into this next year, whether that be cEDH, what they're going to do Wizards wise, new sets. So I guess we could start with the takes on 24. What was your overall take
on 24
on the year of 2024 in Magic?
Man, this is going to sound crazy because like I've seen both sides to this take, where some people really loved the direction that everything went, and then some people just absolutely like hated the direction that it went. I actually am pretty happy with the bans overall. I'm always in favor of like unbanning things instead of banning things, but I do think that it has encouraged people to be creative and try different things, whereas like you just kind of get locked in onto like 1 to 2 things. And now I'm even to the point where I don't necessarily think that they should ban like a Thassa's Oracle or anything like that, but I honestly think it'd be kind of neat to see what happens, just because I think it would be kind of interesting I think it'd be interesting to see how it shakes up the meta again. But overall, like I was, I'm not necessarily happy that the cards got banned, but I'm okay with how the game has changed and progressed since the bans.
Right. No, and I kind of agree with that. Like whenever the bans first got announced, like I had a moment, like I feel like this was a lot of the community too, where at least the decent portion of the community, where, most people kind of looked at it and just like, oh, and then like they got over it and they got to work.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of the other channels, like that was their biggest thing, is like, especially like one of the things that stood out to me, and I saw this in kind of real time through the Discord, but like comedian brought up like people in the CSA Discord, like immediately just like, they're like, oh, that sucks. Let's get to work on something different. And I think that where it really sets things apart, it's like you're saying, like it allowed a lot of opportunity for people to be creative. Those first few tournaments that we saw post ban, there was a lot, like, what was it? There was one event where like a Pride of the Hulklade from Murders of Karlov Manor or something like that top.
Yes.
I think Godo like won an event like immediately, immediately following the things. Like there was some good stuff, but I think that now a lot of decks have kind of settled in, and like I don't know if it's a fortunate thing or an unfortunate thing, but we're still seeing the top being the TNT, the Blue Farm, the Rog Sai. I honestly, like, I feel like Kennen should be right there at the top, but I think Kennen kind of falls into that category of like, you really got to know what you're doing piloting the deck.
Yeah.
I can't sit here and deny that like Sisay took a big hit, because it did, and I'm struggling to figure out where she really falls. But like, I think that it definitely balanced things out in a way, but I don't feel like it solved any real answers that the format's needing. I know that I think Lamora brought up in like one of his recent videos on like, really one of the big things is, what do you do about the priority order and the seating? And that, I think for me personally, that would be an area I'd like to see going into this next year what happens. But that's for probably later on in the discussion.
It was cool. I like, Jewel Lotus is nice, but even then, I didn't really like it. If you want me to be really honest with you, I think that I don't know how to, like, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but I think that getting rid of stuff like Jewel Lotus, for instance, was probably a good thing in the sense that it really encouraged people to just slam it and then jam whatever their commander was like immediately, and it would be very unprotected. People would tend to have like you either would get out like a ton of really early advantage or somebody would just get blown out because like in your head you're looking at this card going 3 mana, but then it's gone. It's like a quick burst, it's gone
So
after that.
almost like it really encouraged like a lot of like almost reckless
Yes.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with Zerg, which again, I was worse with Zerg then than I am now, but I mean, there would be times where I would keep Jewel Lotus hands and I'd say, oh yeah, like this is gonna pay for the generic mana and one of my Esper. Now,
Right.
it sucks I can't take advantage of all three of the mana, but oh well. And I'd slam it and I'd keep a hand that was maybe like a a zero rock, a land, and then Jewel Lotus, and then you crack it and you get your Zer out, and then everybody's like, yeah, then we're gonna swing with Necropotence, or we're gonna get Necropotence, and we're gonna try to win. But then you realize, like, I've got 2 mana on board right now. I'm not gonna more than likely make enough mana in Esper in my end step to just win.
Right.
Or even for some of the other pilot, like again, like a Rogsai, Jeweled Lotus wasn't really. I don't know. I don't think that did anything really for that deck, did it?
No, I don't think it did. I think that decks that take the biggest advantage of something like a Jeweled Lotus. Obviously, I'm gonna simp for Sisay for a second because like it's 3-drop, made 3 mana. I mean, it's like I said, the other day on like where I could hold back and build up my resources, and then I just cast a Jeweled Lotus and I cast Sisay off of it, and then I'm ready for 1, 2, maybe 3 activations depending on how I'm trying to start that chain in that moment. Whereas now it's either I'm having to cast her early and she's just kind of sitting there and I might be able to get some swings off or something like that, or at least hold up the free interaction type pieces with her if I have it. But other than that, I'm having to almost wait too long in the game to cast her because most people know what the game plan is, and they are instantly going to see that as, oh, I need to counter this right now, or I have this piece of interaction removal that she needs to be taken care of. I think Najila is kind of in the same boat. Where I think it makes a huge difference is in decks like Tivit, which is still performing really well because it's slowed down, but it doesn't have as explosive of a start because you have a 6 mana commander that you have that just kind of got, chopped off at the knees because like that's half the cost right there. Same thing with something like Atraxa. Atraxa's still performing somewhat decent right now because the meta overall is slower, but you're not getting the explosive start like you once did. Same thing kind of with Kenrith, if you think about it, and even Blue Form to an extent because of Crom.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's kind of the same thing too. What I was saying, it's encouraging people to really find hands that aren't. You're keeping hands that aren't as fragile. If that makes sense. Like if you go all in on the Crom plan and that's your plan, and then Crom dies or it gets countered, which it's probably not likely it's going to get countered, but it may just die, and then you're just sitting there going, oh well, I was hoping to do something with that, but now you're just kind of
right.
Oh well. I don't think you're going to pay 7 mana to cast a Crom.
Probably not.
Yeah. And then on top of that, it's another one of those situations where you may have kept you may have specifically went and got lands for Crom, like things that are going to allow you to cast a Crom, but then now you've almost shut yourself out of your Timna plan also. So it's kind of causing it's I feel like it's encouraging people to play a little bit more responsibly, to actually like take time, think through their mulligans, and actually keep, I don't know how to say, like, I think it was good because it got people away from the focus of focusing on their commander too much. Like, again, like I was saying earlier, it's almost like you want your deck to be the plan and then your commander is like a backup.
Right.
And it's there if you need it. But it can be the thing. Like, it can be the win, and that's totally fine too. Like, that's great. But the more you rely on this one specific thing, the more frail everything kind of becomes, if that makes sense. Which, I mean, you, not to bash Sisay, but like, Sisay plays bad cards to facilitate the Sisay plan. But it's just the reason you're willing to compromise there is because when Sisay comes down, you have an instant speed way of just like, oh, I win, depending on obviously what's out.
Right.
But you're like, hey, well, I just win here. Like, you know, I got it. And obviously that's going to be the best way to ensure that you're just closing the game out is just win.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes she does that. A lot of times it doesn't play out that way.
Yeah.
You need to play. Well, you played Sisay once. I think you picked up my deck once and you played it. And, and it did turn into a situation where you're just like, oh, I think I just win.
Yeah.
I think I do this and this, and it just happens.
Oh, it was gorgeous. Guy's Cradle and like Derevia Meal.
Yeah, there's no stopping at that point, really. But, you know, aside from the bans, I feel like that's been like obviously like the most impactful thing in the format. And I think that a lot of people are still kind of like, okay, where are we at? Mm-hmm. But like even throughout 2024, like we got some decent support. Mm-hmm. You know, like, you know, even though say we don't have as fast of a start, just kind of the direction the format has gone now. And I feel like the argument that gets brought up as far as like, you know, trying to present a win on top of someone else's win, like we got things like the Valley Flood Caller and like the obviously Born Upon the Wind wasn't printed this year, but in conjunction with the Valley and being able to do loops like that, like some of the cards that got printed out throughout the year. So like, you know, kind of maybe going into that as far as, you know, again, some of our takes over the year, not just with the bans and whatnot, but what are your thoughts and stances on like the important cards that you've seen come out of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know, there's a couple of really good cards, like obviously that came out that made an impact, but I don't think that anybody can argue that anything made more of an impact than Valley Flood Caller. I think that card was the biggest thing. And the more that you get these like crazy flash enabler cards that are very efficient, and also that one allows you to potentially have some loops and stuff you can do that get kind of nutty and crazy. But I feel like 2023 probably had a much bigger impact, like individual card wise, on the game as a whole. Like we had so many great cards that came out with some of the sets. Like, I mean, the Lord of the Rings, obviously, dude, there were so many cards that came out in that set. Whereas this one, it wasn't all just all at once. It felt like everything was pretty spaced out. You would get the Valley Flood Caller, you would get like Enduring Vitality, Into the Flood Maw, like one little piece here, one little piece here, one little piece here. And it wasn't like just crazy warp the format. Whereas I feel like some of the cards in the past have come out like a Bowmaster or something like that, and immediately it makes a huge change on what's happening. Yeah. So I don't think any of the cards specifically made a huge change on what's happening right now. I think that, I don't know, I would say if there was one card that made the biggest, like warped the format the most this year, was probably just Valley Flood Caller. And even then, I don't think it drastically changed anything.
Well, and something you brought up, because you mentioned another card in there too, like with Enduring Vitality. I think that, especially like where we were just talking about the bans, like I think green is the color that got the biggest buff out of anything. And the Enduring Vitality, like especially like if, you know, we were talking about like certain decks being able to now perform, or, you know, the meta is shifted in a way where you know, it's not just a Rogsai, it's not just a Blue Farm or Sisay at the whatever it might be that's taking advantage of Dockside and all these rocks. But now you have Enduring Vitality that like, oh, Rog Thras is a thing. It was before, but it's even more solidified now. It doesn't need the Dockside Timber Saber-tooth lines. It just needs these few things. And the way, I mean, Leo plays it chaining like what Ewit and like Bolt and things like that. It promotes interesting play patterns, you know. Kennen being able to flip into that motherfucker, like like getting an enduring mentality off the flip, and then just like getting more activations for no reason, other than you're just doing Kennen things. Like, obviously, I'm gonna go back to Sisei because like it's such a strong card in there because you need the mana. Even in TNT, like I wouldn't say all lists are playing Enduring Vitality, but why not include it? You know, especially if you're able to like get a bunch of activations and flip into interactive pieces because you just have that extra mana on board from it being there, plus all the it being like a good target for some of the sack engines like Eldritch Evolution or Neoform or things like that. I think that in addition to Valley Flood Caller, I think that card in particular, the Enduring Vitality, is contender for top spot as well. But you know, I also agree with what you're saying as far as like it wasn't just one set. In particular, like you mentioned, 2023, Lord of the Rings, and everyone was obsessed, and like the main cards coming out of it, Bowmaster and the One Ring, right? So like. But as far as the rest of 23 goes, like I'm kind of in the same boat as 24. I don't remember what else came out. That year, if I'm being honest. With this past year, you know.
Oh, well, even Born Upon a Win. I forgot that came out in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and that came out in Lord of the Rings too. Like they were prepared and ready for, I guess, cEDH. But like, you know, the beginning of this year, we had a very lackluster return. The Ravnica remastered set.
I couldn't tell you anything that came out.
I couldn't shocks. You know, that's all I could think of. And then they had like the additional clue set that came with it.
Oh yeah,
couldn't tell you anything about that. Murders of Karlov Manor. That was like Ravnica released a second time this year. And we were talking like before we started filming, we were talking about like what the only thing that came out of it was really the Surveil lands. Is what it seems. I think I'm seeing a lot more play from like Trouble in Pairs.
Oh yeah.
But that's about the only other card I could. Well, no, Delny.
Delny did come out in that.
Delny came out of that set. So I mean, there's a few things there in it that I think as we approach the end of the year, like Delny wasn't really being played in a lot of decks, and then once the bans happen, oh, here we go in this TNT build or even in Blue Farm. You know, it's picked up speed, but the Surveil lands in particular out of that set are the big things. After that was, the Fallout. I think it was the Fallout.
I don't know anything good.
I couldn't tell you anything that came out of Fallout. I think some of the art stuff, like getting like the rainbow art, like Soul Rings and like the Mana Vault, things like that, seems to be the high end stuff. I think there might Mothman.
Yeah, we got a couple of like that and the Master Transcendent, which are like kind of interchangeable, but I don't know if we got anything else. I mean, they were talking about potential like boardwalk, like nuclear fallout or whatever it was, but
something
that's not even that good.
We talked about Magda last on the other thing, but like does Magda even play is it Bottle Cap Blast? I don't remember.
It does play Bottle Cap Blast.
Does it? Yeah. So I mean, maybe that for like a very niche like deck. I mean, that makes sense. After that was what Modern Horizons 3, I think. You had talked about how you've picked up the Storm Drake.
Oh yeah, the Volatile Drake.
Yeah.
Which I'm actually that's interesting too. I'm actually on both of the Drakes. I'm on Gilded and Volatile Drake. But if you want it to be, I take your creature, cool. Like that's cool. If you want it to be 2 mana, kill your creature, you can do that. Like there's ways to use it, but no, I think that card's amazing.
Right, and I agree with you on that. I think honestly, maybe what could potentially be the best thing out of MH3, you know, is the fetches that were printed in the set. And I think that was the Flooded Strand, Polluted Delta, I think Bloodstained Mire, Windswept Heath, and
did we also get Vexing Bauble in that?
We did get Vexing Bauble in that.
Okay.
That's a piece of shit card.
That card, yeah.
I hate that card.
I had to think about that. I was like, did we?
I've lost so many games to people casting that on their turn. I'm like, are you sure? And then the next person winning right after that, I'm like, I can't do anything. I have this Force of Will in hand or a Mind Break Trap, and now I can't cast it. And they're like, oh, I'm not going to crack it. So,
that's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a card I'd like to forget about. There's a reason it got banned in other formats.
Yeah. Was there anything else notable that came out of that? Anything you can think of?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what else was in it. I think maybe Sink into Stupor. That sees quite a bit of play in some decks.
Yeah.
Either being able to return something to their, like return the spell or play it as a land. I don't know. Are Rogue Silas playing it right now? What?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No, I know. I've seen some lists playing it. Like, typically it's your more like control-y builds. Like it'll be like Talion and Master of Keys, things like that. I've seen them play Sink into Stupor.
Yeah.
I actually the Zur deck that won that big tournament, it was playing Sink into Stupor, which it had a couple of interesting cards in it too. It was playing things like Dovin's Veto and
oh god.
Yeah.
Did it make you want to put that together?
No.
Okay, good.
But yeah, they were playing a lot of stuff like Sink into Stupor that would get around like, oh, can't be countered. Or they play get Dovin's Veto. They were playing, that was the one that was playing like the Disruptor Flute card, which I actually did slot that in to try it out. And it's come up a couple times.
Is that another MH3 card?
I don't know. I really don't.
I think it is.
Is it?
We'd have to go back and check.
It's interesting though. It's like just a 2-mana flash artifact. The only reason I kind of like it is because it'll help turn on my Mopal.
Yeah.
But it's also nice because like it'll make things cost more, which typically I don't use it for that, but it will stop activated abilities of cards. So like you can use it to basically stop like people from necroing. You can use it to stop people from untapping their basalt monoliths. You can use it to stop them from activating like Thrasios and all sorts of stuff like that.
Right.
Which is fun, but other than that, like it's been interesting. Like I said, I don't know if I'll keep it in the deck, but I did slot it in just to try it out.
But yeah, outside of that, like the cards we listed there, the fetches, just for the sake of making that particular set of fetches a little bit more affordable for players, you know, kind of like what we said before, just like trying to find some of those options because, you know, not everyone's going to want to foil out a deck, but if even on the higher end, like higher end casual players or just trying to get into cEDH, some of those fetches are much more costly for them to get into and whatnot. And maybe even the same can be said for the printing from the Ravnica set at the beginning of the year. Like, yeah, we're getting more shocks and they're getting kind of overproduced and things like that. But maybe it was a way for someone to be able to afford it. And so that I could see that as a positive thing from those sets.
Yeah.
Moving on from it though, I think the next set was like what? Outlaws was the next one. I think it was Outlaws after that.
Yeah.
And I don't remember a damn thing from Outlaws. I'll be honest.
Stelly.
Yeah, that probably another commander I will never play because I get confused and my brain hurts watching the deck.
Unless we white elephant it, and then you have to play it.
Yeah, I'll try it. I'm just gonna be fumbling it the whole time.
Hey, it's all good. You just cast 2 things, and then you cast an untap draw card type spell, and you're good. Literally, there's one that's like it's a red one, and you gain control of Stella Lee and untap her and then draw a card, and then you tap her, create a copy of it, draw your whole deck, win. Thorkel.
Oh my god, I don't even remember what other cards are printed in it, except for Loot. That was he's pretty much the only card I actually remember being printed in that set.
Yeah, which is funny because his like isn't looting a mechanic?
Yeah,
and he doesn't loot.
Yeah.
I just thought that was like.
I liked him. I thought he was pretty cool.
I think he's cool. The artwork's cool.
He would be a deck I'd be interested in trying to play this year.
Is he teamer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because could probably grind out some games like Hullbreaker lines and Underworld Breach lines and things like that. But he's just, I don't know, he's a little odd. The deck construction for it, it's kind of like how Atraxa, you have to play like multiple like different things throughout it. Like you want to play obviously Invasion of Ikoria, and you want to play the Teferi in that list, but like, you know, it's very dependent on the permanent types that are on the battlefield. So it's just kind of like, I can see where it's a really good card or has potential. I just don't know if it's there yet.
Did we get Plagon this year?
Did we get what?
Plagon. That Azorius fish thing. Starfish.
We did in Foundations.
Did we?
Which I think was the last thing that got released this year.
Yeah.
We did. That's another one that I think is just like, he's popped up out of nowhere and people are on him for the hype right now. He might be a Cody situation.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a good way to compare that.
That would, because I remember I think I was watching one of Play to Win's most recent videos, and like one of the comments that were made of it is like, it's not really in that great of colors.
Azorius is not,
yeah, because like Azoria, like blue's great, white is not. And so like if you're gonna play a 2-color in blue right now in the format, like Dimir and Simic and even Izzet all have Azorius beat out.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna be one. I think Plagon's kind of one of those things at the moment where it's like, oh, like
I feel like that's what happens though. Ian goes and plays a deck, puts it on the map, and then everybody tries it. They realize they're not Ian, and then
I'll agree with you on that. Like, it takes a while to get up to that level.
Yeah, he literally, that dude could just take a box of sleeves and go win a tournament.
Probably.
He wouldn't even need cards.
You know what deck I'd like to see him play? Leo Savala.
That would be interesting.
I'd like to see that.
Didn't he play Savala Brostorm at one point?
I don't know.
Maybe. He's one with some interesting stuff. Did you see one of his newest decks that he came out?
No.
It was Karlak and then the blue background.
Oh yeah, it's like the extra combat one.
Yes.
I think.
Karlak, and then the background makes creatures. So you basically will get in for damage and you make more creatures and you get an extra combat, but it's literally just a combat damage deck and he top forward with it. That's all it is. I don't know if there's any other. It's is it combat damage? And he somehow top forward a tournament with it.
Well, like, I know we said that there wasn't much notable stuff in Outlaws like that we can think of at the time of what we're recording, but like literally this is the Wild West of Magic right now.
What else we got?
We had Assassin's Creed that got released.
Did we get anything in that was decent?
I know that Sisse, at least, some pilots have started playing Bossum, however you pronounce the name of the card.
Yeah.
But I think people have been with Sisse pilots have been playing it over Lavinia here recently is something that I've noticed. I haven't had enough opportunity to kind of test out the card. Aside from that, I don't really know what else. I think I wanted to try out Apple of Eden at one point. I know Leo tried it out a little bit. I don't know who else has really tried that card. I think that to try that card, you have to have a way of like really getting it out. Because I feel like it's kind of one of those gotcha cards. Like people aren't really going to expect someone playing that card, I feel like, but if it comes down and it sticks, it could probably do something. I just don't think enough people have tried it out, especially since it doesn't fill the same slot as the One Ring. But if you have a 4-drop artifact, that like, which one do you pick? The one that's indestructible or the one that you just get to steal someone's hand and they might not have shit in their hand versus that indestructible one that is going to get you a card every single time and gives you protection as soon as it slams down. So
well, if you build your deck well, I feel like you are going to want to see more cards in your deck versus you could potentially just be seeing cards in somebody else's hand that are just garbage.
Yeah.
But I did see there were people even in there were Rogside pilots that were testing that card out for a little bit.
Really?
And I think most of them came off of it. But yeah, like they would just use it to where if you were getting low, I guess, on your like the cards in your hand, you would just start taking somebody else's cards and start trying to spit out. Because I mean, how much mana it can make turn one. If somebody mulliganed well, you could just take their hand and spit out a bunch of fast rocks, or potentially like wheel and then grab somebody else's stuff, whatever you needed to do. But it would just allow you to see more cards. But in that instance, I think it's great because people don't really have cards to interact with it in that instance, and they've got a full grip. But the longer that the game goes on, if people aren't drawing a lot of cards and the hands are getting thinner and thinner and thinner, you're kind of in that weird spot where it's like, okay, well, and then if with Valley, Flood Caller, and other stuff, it's like somebody goes and cracks it, and you're like, oh, I'll just cast my stuff at flash speed. It's fine.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. But I don't know. It is it has legs. I just don't know how far it's going to walk.
Right. So, I mean, those are the only two things I can think of coming out of the Assassin's Creed set. Like, after that, I believe was Bloomburrow.
Yeah.
And we've already talked about Valley Flood Caller.
Mm-hmm.
The only other cards that we haven't really talked about are, Mockingbird?
That was a good card.
I think that's might be the only one that we haven't talked about from this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of really good potential for some of the high power commanders out of this set. But if we're looking at like just cEDH specifically, or at least what is current in the meta, I feel like it's the Valley and the Mockingbird. I can't remember much else outside of that.
Was it Into the Flood Maw? Was that the only
Yeah, I forgot about that one. We had just talked about that one right before we started.
Yeah.
And now I feel like an idiot.
No, you're good. I think those are the three though. I can't think of anything else that came out of that set that was like, again, just more reprints of cool arts. But oh, wait a minute. Was that card already around? Did we get Hazel in that set?
We did get Hazel as part of the commander part of that set, I believe. So yeah, Hazel's, I forgot about Hazel too, especially since like TNT running all the devoted Dread lines and things like that. So yeah, we got 4 really good cards coming out of that, especially since like Into the Flood Maw being a really good interactive piece, good removal. Like, you don't have the ability to do what you can do with Chain of Vapor, as far as like if you're trying to like build up your storm count, you can bounce all your stuff back by sacking the lands. But I think that's also the drawback to Chain, in that it can be a really good like political piece, or you can remove something, but then someone instantly comes after your board and removes whatever you need to stick. Or if you try to use it as a political piece and the other like removing this person because like person's piece because they have a bunch of lands and their stuff is at the like kind of threatening the table as well, but then this person's about to win and it's like, oh, I'm gonna do this so that way I'm hoping that you're gonna make a copy. And like most people don't even fall for that. They're just like, no, I'm not gonna let it. I'm not gonna do anything about it. So that's where I think Into the Flood Maw is a really strong card. We already talked about Valley in the beginning. You reminded me of Hazel. We just remembered Mockingbird, which is good. Just clone effects, just I don't feel like are as strong as they once were.
Yeah.
So
all the things that it's kind of weird. Like, it's still nice because it's a 2 mana. It could be a 2 mana Bowmaster, which is nice.
Yeah, 1 mana Esper Sentinel.
Yeah, but other than that, like
6 mana Tivit.
Unfortunate. Yeah, and a 5 mana Seaborn Muse. Yeah. Whereas, like, I would rather almost just have Fimage a lot of the times. But the flying does matter, especially in Timna style decks.
Well, even if you go with the Valley lines, say if you have birds, or like you don't have Birds of Paradise, but you've made a copy of something on the board with the Mockingbird, and you're able to flash in the Valley Flood Caller, and you have Retraction Helix in hand, and target your Mockingbird that's a copy of whatever because it's still a bird, and then you're still able to combo off right then.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's probably one of the better upsides to the way it actually copies things as well for that line in particular.
No, that makes sense.
So after Bloomburrow though, we have Duskmourn. Is that what we said then?
Yes.
Okay.
Duskmourn.
Yeah. So we have Duskmourn after that.
And that was what, Enduring Vitality?
We got the Enduring Vitality, which we talked about it already. And then Marvin.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about Marvin a little bit. Great Sisay card. Can't say much more than that. Pseudo haste enabler for that. But I don't really feel like it has a home anywhere else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I
feel like Enduring Vitality definitely helped out Kennen decks. And for other decks, just having the ability to tap other creatures and make more dorks. I think that's good too.
Right. I think where the format is anything and well, I don't want to say everything, but anything that's going to speed your deck up. That's what it seems like the position wants to be in.
Yeah.
Whether it's a resource gain, like a Ristic Study, Fish, Smothering Tithe, things like that, or you are just outperforming in mana, and it doesn't matter if your shit gets countered because you could just continue to slam things down.
Yeah.
So, Enduring Vitality. One card I was thinking about too, that I think I kind of forgot about because I haven't played it. Razorkin Needlehead. Are you familiar with that card?
The draw and it deals the damage to the person that drew. It's a really good Obnixilis card.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a card that really helps with the Obnixilis pilots. I think that if we're looking at two color combinations, I almost feel like, Rakdos kind of got the shit end of the stick after following the bans. But Obnixilis, there's still some cards in there and some combo lines with the Walking Ballista, the Agatha Soul Cauldron, being able to play all will be one, things like that I think that deck still has some legs to stand on, especially since you have access to both the red and the black rituals.
Oh yeah,
you can still cheat him out. There's enough stuff in the format where people are taking 1 point of damage directly. Razor can punishing people for playing the card draw engines as well as a Bowmaster or things like that. I think it's in a good position to counter what is currently going on in the meta.
I forgot who it was that said this, but I loved the way they worded it. But they said that Razorkin Needlehead is essentially what Bowmaster should have been. It actually punishes card draw. It punishes the person drawing the cards rather than being disguised as punishing card draw, but in reality you're just creature removal. That's all it is. It's oh no, I'm not actually going to hit the person drawing cards. I'm just going to kill all this guy's creatures and their dorks and everything else. Yeah. Wait, we did get Master of Keys too, didn't we?
Yeah, we did get Master Keys. You know more about that card than I do.
Yeah, I think that deck's got, obviously it's done well in some tournaments and it's got some good legs on it. I just think that it's a little bit, this is so weird. This is another great example of that. I actually completely agree. I was watching the Mind Sculptors video and they brought up Master of Keys and they brought up Marnius. And in reality, you would think that Marnius would be the better option of the two because they're both infinite mana outlets in the command zone. And the difference is with Master of Keys, it still is fragile to graveyard removal and also Drannith. If Drannith's down, you can't do any of your escaping or anything like that. Whereas Marnius, if Marnius comes down, you're not putting the cards into your graveyard. You're just drawing a ton of cards. You're paying all your mana into it, and then you're creating your tokens. And then on top of that, Marnius with a Smothering Tithe out and other stuff is just, you get treasures and you get card draw. It's amazing. But for some reason, Marnius pilots have a hard time getting through, whereas the Master of Keys have seemed to be doing a lot better. I wonder if that's just it's being played more than Marnius, but I think that it's very similar to that deck. But I don't know. I'm curious to see if that deck continues to do well, especially as new cards come out. Because it's kind of the same thing that I always say with Zerg. We're always getting new enchantments, kind of like you were saying with Sisay. We're always getting new legendaries. So it's one of those things where we could all of a sudden just have a card come out of nowhere, and it's essentially I've seen people call the list Esper Breach, but we may actually get a card that is Underworld Breach, not in red, and then all of a sudden it's whoa, that deck gets way better.
Right.
So we'll just see. We'll just have to see what happens. But it's got some solid legs. It does really good. I actually like the list quite a bit.
Of course, we also talked about like you running the Praetor's Grasp with the brain freeze and things like that in there. Just we'll see if you ever get that one off.
Yeah, we'll see.
It'll probably happen.
Poor Brandon. Should. I think it will. Poor Brandon.
Poor Brandon. But outside of that, I think is that the rest of Dustborn?
I don't think there's anything.
I think I've said this for every set. I can't remember anything else.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that is, and I think that's something that they're about to fix going into this year, is just the number of sets being released. I feel like since really 2020, and I was out of the game for a while whenever COVID hit and things like that, but I feel like there has been so much released in that amount of time that it's hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
So we had Dustborn. Was Foundations immediately following that? Was that?
I believe so.
I think.
Did Marvel come up the Secret Layers and stuff? Did they come out between then?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's it. But I mean.
Yeah. Which that Captain America deck seems like it has some legs, but.
I mean, those people that used to play Nadu, hold on to your Shuko and just like infinitely like Power Artifact and what I say, Grim Monolith.
Yeah.
Or Basalt Monolith, whatever the combo. Both yeah. It all works. Just infinitely throw Shuko at people.
Yeah.
And there you go. I mean, more people I think are sold on Storm than anything else. And then like Iron Man and Wolverine are like, you will stay over there.
Grixis is just good, man. It's a good color pie, but I don't know. Not a lot of people are on Jeskai. We'll just have to see what happens with it. So is that every set though?
Well, I think the Foundations one, and we talked about Plagon already. The only card I can really think of at the moment is it High-Fae Trickster?
That's the
Leo plays it.
4-mana Flash Enabler. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, High-Fae Trickster.
Yeah, that's the only other card I can kind of think of out of the set that I've seen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I kind of, whenever Foundations came out, I overlooked a lot of things.
Yeah.
I feel like I've overlooked a lot of things in this year.
Did we get Nadu this year?
Yeah, he's in MH3. Yeah, and we forgot to talk about him in the bands. So Nadu or no, don't.
Nadu, yeah. Like I said, I've always been more of a proponent of like don't ban, just unban stuff. But I get it. It was kind of miserable.
It was a little bit miserable. I think the only times I've ever like truly played against that deck, the Chase here in our local meta, he knew what he was doing. It's the deck it kind of just plays itself though. I've seen people try to pilot it and like they do well because of what the deck did, but they didn't understand the concepts within the deck itself.
Yeah.
Like, and I was talking to Leo the other day when we were on our way up to that tournament in Louisville, and he had played in a game against the same Nadu pilot I had played in earlier on in the event, and the guy got so lost in what he was doing. I think he either shuffled his hand or he shuffled his graveyard into his library as they were going into turns, because he was losing track of all the triggers. He was losing track of what he was doing with the deck, and he just picked everything up and started shuffling it. And then he started doing more Nadu triggers. He goes, I just shuffled everything into my deck.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like an example of like the deck will do what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
But you got to know what you're doing. You got to be aware of what you are doing to stay on top of things.
Yeah. I just think that, I don't know. Man. I mean, even in cEDH, you can have like miserable things to play against, but in reality, I don't think that even right now, there's not stuff that I'm just pulling up to the table and playing against and being like, oh my God, this is awful. It really just comes down to when you're sitting at a table and maybe you have somebody that's playing a certain deck, or it really comes down to like skill level now that I've seen a lot of times. Like somebody will pull up to a table, they're not respecting the value pieces and stuff on the board. So they're feeding Lothos, they're feeding, Ristics and Mystics and Smothering Tides and all this crazy stuff. But other than that, like, that can be a little upsetting, but it's not really like miserable, and you're still like they're progressing through their turn.
Right.
I honestly feel like the games have become much healthier now. So I don't know. I guess not. Don't.
No, don't. Now, the only other like really important card that we forgot to mention of 2024 is probably my favorite commander that came out this year.
Flubs come.
It's probably Flubs. Yeah.
What?
I love that little frog, dude.
Yeah.
We just. I mean, he's not like Nadu. If you like, he does not. He pilots himself, but you either A, have to know what you're doing, or B, not have a single care in the world what's going on in that match. You just brought up like the game's being healthier, and like, hopefully being healthier and people paying attention to what they're doing and making sure they're not feeding this, that, and the other. Flubs don't give a fuck. So it's just like, I love that deck. It's so it scratches my brain in a very unique way. I'll put it that way. And it's so silly. It's so silly. But I think outside of that, has there been anything else from this past year that to really cover that you could think of?
Nothing I can think of.